Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some of the important themes. So one of the important themes is that the mind is an information processing machine. Okay, and this is true regardless of whether it's a connectionist model or a more traditional informational processing model. The idea is that the mind literally just is a machine that is for processing information, right? So it takes incoming information and transforms that incoming information using internal mental processes to derive some sort of output. And that output is usually in a different form than what the input is in. So let's take an example, right? And say there's some environmental input. Let's say you see somebody at the grocery store who looks familiar, right? So you encode that stimulus or that face that's associated with that person. That, information goes into your sensory memory, and then you pay attention to it, and then it goes into your short-term memory. Well, in order to know whether it's that face is somebody you know, you probably need to search your long-term memory, right, for that face. And then in order to, and then once you find that, maybe some face that looks like the face that is that you encoded recently, well, now both of those representations, the current representation of the face at the grocery store and the face that you found in your long-term memory, now you'll maybe compare those two faces to each other and then make a decision. And then finally, there's whatever response or decision you make in your short-term memory, well, then that sort of message gets sent to either your mouth to say hi or to your hand to wave or whatever the response may be. It's usually a motor response of some sort. Um, and the interesting thing about this is, and it may not be as it may seem simple, but or obvious now to us now, but the sort of implicit assumption here is that, you can take something as big as cognition or maybe something smaller as face recognition, and you can break it that process down into multiple sub processes or subtasks. So we'll take another example, right? Imagine if, this is a picture naming task, right? So say I see a picture of a dog, right? And it enters my visual recognition system. Well, when I see a picture of a dog, I might have to process the semantic content that's associated with the dog concept. And uh, and then once I'm done with that, then maybe I have to select the lexical selection. Lexical selection, that's just a fancy word for retrieving the word associated with the semantic concept, in this case, dog. So retrieving the actual word dog. And then the phoneme selection. Now I'm retrieving the sounds or phonemes that are associated with the word dog. So d, g. And then articulation, that's where I actually articulate the word dog. Um, and this idea of breaking down functions into multiple sub-processes is really important. And I think we take it for granted. It's really important because in order to explain intelligent behavior, you know, you can't simply explain it using something that's also intelligent. You need to break down something that's complex into more simple components, right? So in saying that something is so if you say that something's complex is caused by something complex, you haven't really explained anything. You've simply shifted the problem, right? Uh, and now you just need to explain what caused the other thing that's complex, right? That caused the other complex thing, right? And so the point here is that in order to explain something complex, it's important to use simpler mechanisms, right? And break down a big function or a big cognitive operation into multiple sub-processes. Uh, and this is related to something called the homuncular fallacy. Okay. In the homuncular fallacy, I'm going to use the example of something like vision, right? So, like, if you wanted to say, how does this person perceive this egg in this pan, right? Well, one might say, oh, well, this is perceived by a little person. There's like a little entity or person inside that person's mind that perceives the world and watches what we see and makes decisions for us, right? Sounds interesting. Okay. So there's a little person, and I wanted to make sure that this is kind of like Inside Out, the movie Inside Out. It's like a cartoon, an animation where there's a bunch of tiny little entities that represent or process different emotions. There's like an angry entity, a joy entity, a sad entity, right? These are kind of like little people that do certain things, right? Um, and it seems like it explains it, but the problem is it begs the question, how does a homunculus perceive then, right? If a homunculus, the way we perceive is by a homunculus perceiving everything for us, then how does the how does the homunculus perceive, right? If the homunculus is watching, we'd need another homunculus inside of that homunculus, right? And this, in effect, creates sort of an infinite chain or an infinite regress of homunculi. Uh, and so the fallacy, this homuncular fallacy, refers to an error in reasoning in which one tries to explain something by asserting something that itself requires the same level or amount of explanation. And so this is one of the the challenges of cognitive science is by explaining something really, really complex like the mind or cognition. Uh, but you can't just say, "Oh, cognition happens, is explained by cognition," right? You have to explain it with sort of smaller sub processes and simpler sub processes. Okay, and then in the next video, we'll talk about representations.